Hello, friends. Chris here. User Freefork had a couple of questions about my palette swapping slash color lookup table video. So I thought I'd make another video kind of clarifying some stuff and maybe make a more complex example that could be more useful to you and show you how I do it. So first I'll show you what we're going to be making. You can see it's just Vivian here holding a rifle, and right now she's all red. If I hit a button, I can give her the colors, normal colors, and then I can also do things like change her hair color and her eye color, her skin color. She's got a primary and secondary color scheme based on the green and purple that I can change, and pants. And the rifle stays the same, and the feet. So to start making something like this, I start an Aseprite, and you need to make two things. You need to make your character sprites themselves, and you need to make a texture you're going to use for your color lookup table. So for the character, I have an animation here, just 6 frames, and I have index palette. So when you make your sprites, used an index palette, and each of these colors on the palette represents a certain part of her character. So the first one is I always use for transparent background color, which I just use solid white. And then the second one I use is black. And then these two, next two I make her hair color. So you can see those are related to her hair. And then when I say color, I'm not including the number of tones. So like for eyes, I have blue eye color, but I've also got a dark and light tone. So there's actually three colors, but I just call it one color for eyes. Same thing with skin. She's got one skin color, but there's 3 tones. And you can have more than one. You can have more than one in light, dark tone. You can have as many tones as can fit on your color lookup table. You just have to actually make the table. So then I've got her feet, which I use for these next 3. And the way I have it set up is I can use these 3 colors in any sprite and still have it be those colors. And then the next 3 are her pants, which is a light color and then 2 dark tones. And then a primary and secondary color, which is the greens and the purples. And then we don't use these for this project. And then the next 4 are her gun colors, which are the light and dark gun stock, and then the metal, the light and dark metal on the gun. And you can see that the light gun stock is only 1 off on the blue channel from the dark tone of her hair color. And the reason I want to use the dark tone of her hair color for the gun stock, but I want to keep them separate so that the shader doesn't see that color and then make it whatever color her hair is, like if she's got red hair or something. So I just use this as kind of a placeholder, and that's why there's 2 of these dark browns. These are for pistols, so I can change the pistols and keep them separate from the rifles and keep the rifles separate from the hair and so on. And that's why this gray is similar to this gray, except for, again, the blue channel's off by 1. And so now how are we going to make this into something our shader can use? So you need to make a color lookup table here. And so the first column is mapped to the black, and then the second and third column correspond to the light and dark tones of her hair color. So this first column here is a dark tone, and then this column is the light tone. So together, anything in these columns will get mapped to her hair. So this will be, dark and light. And so if you look at it compared to the app, if we zero it all out, it starts all at red. And then the next one is that dark brown, and then another brown, and kind of a red, brown. And then we get into the oranges and the yellows. And you can kind of see it coming down the columns there until you get into these dark colors, and then it'll loop back around to the top. And so we do that for each of the colors. Like you map the next 3. These 2 are hair, Then these three correspond to the three eye colors. Then these three correspond to the three skin colors. Then these three correspond to the three colors that you use for her feet, or that don't change. The reason they don't change is because I just make them go all the way down like the black. So if you use them with anything, the column will always pick that same color, and then, or the row will always pick that same color. Sorry. And then this is the pants, which gets mapped to this next three, and then you've got the primary and secondary colors. And the reason this is where we'll use a little bit of math, because you see how it's not like the other ones. There's these big blocks. Well, that's because for every color in here, you need to have a block with every color next to it. And then this big block represents your primary color, and these little ones represent your secondary color. So the way it works is, say your primary color is 2, so you go 0, 1, 2, it'll be this orange and start here. And say the secondary color is 6, it'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That row will give you an orange and green. See how that works? And there's a website I use, a combinations and permutations calculator, and you can see if you have 16 colors and you want to have 4 of them on your sprite and be able to toggle all 4 colors and have any combination of them or permutation, you're gonna need a sprite that's like 65,000 something by 65,000 something. So like if you have 3 colors and you want to choose 4, you need a sprite that's the next power of 2 up from 81, which is 128 by 128. So like if you have 8 colors and you want to choose 4 of them, you're going to need a sprite that's like 4096 by 4096. So in our case, I have 16 colors and I only choose 2 of them, 200, so I can get it in the 256 by 256 sprite. And the way I do that is by breaking the sprite up into parts, and that way like the feet are one part and the legs are only one color, so that's why they only have one set of colors in the column, and in the terms of on the color lookup table. The hair clip, or not the hair clip, sorry, the face and the head part and the hands are only the skin tone. So that's why skin, and that's all the skin tone. So that's why the skin tone has its own, it doesn't have to have any of this doubled up stuff. But when you're dealing with something like the striped shirt and the hair clip that have 2 colors, the torso and then her arm, you need to map them to that big chunk. Again, where if your primary color is 0, it'll be start from here, and then if it's like 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll be like, this row. So that's how you can keep them in the same sprite and have 2 colors. Otherwise, you could break it into another layer and have just the greens and just the purples, but I don't think this is too much. This is like the limit to my tediousness here. So, but that way I break the sprite into a number of components. Then when you put them together, you have your character there. And so you just saw the palette change there. That's what we're going to do next to get the sprites into Game Maker, into something our shader can use. So you remember we use an index palette, so each one of these has a number. So with the way index palette works, like if you change a color, then it'll change all the instances of that color in the picture. So if we load up at this index palette, you can look at the colors. You can see the values down here. You can see the black is still black, but the other colors, the only thing they have is an R value. And I just increment it. And that R value corresponds to a column on this color lookup table. So that's why black is just black, 0. The first 2 are the hair colors, 1 and 2, and you can see the hair colors. The next 3 are the eyes, those correspond to the eyes. So that's how our shader will know what column to grab from, or X value, or in the terms of texture coordinates, they like to be between 0 and 1, and those are normalized. And the X axis is the U coordinate, and the Y axis is the V coordinate. And so we'll have to give it the shader something between 0 and 1. But for now, for me, it's easy, especially when you use a 256 by 256, because that's how many components are in, you know, colors are in, like you can, so you don't have to scale anything. So it makes it real simple. But, so yeah, so these columns get mapped, and then we tell it which row to use, and that's how you customize the color. So it'll grab the column from whatever the sprite tells it to, and then we'll tell it which row to grab. So that's how this shader works. So you'll need to make this texture for each color combination that you want, like for all your tones, lay them out, and then lay out what they map to, you know, and you do that for every set of colors you have. So yeah, so we'll go ahead and save this and export real quick. And so Aseprite makes it really easy to make sprite sheets. So we'll just go ahead and edit this batch file I made, spritesheet.bat. And there's documentation for this on Aseprite's website. But you set this variable to your executable location, and then this next line, you tell it what to export. So we want to export the frame tag idle. We want to split the layers up first so that each layer gets its own row in the sprite sheet. And then we want to name the frame. We want to export the idle tag. So you can have, like, if you have like a walk animation and a run and all these, you know, you can kind of make a matrix here and then just export each frame tag to like its own line on the sheet, right? Like you could just make this next one like walk, like if you had a you know, walk tag like that, but you know, we don't, so we'll only just do idle. So we'll you name the tag, then you name the file, which is this Aseprite file, and then we want to make a sheet, and this is the name of the sprite sheet. We'll call it Sprite Sheet Idle. And so to run this, we'll just double click it, and it'll do a bunch of crap on the command line, and then it'll give you this PNG file. And when you open it up, you'll see that it's kind of got those dark red colors and be in this nice little format here. So now that you have that, we can go into Game Maker and we'll load up some sprites real fast. So first you need, like, I use the hit frame or collision box. I make the main sprite that everything else is kind of going to follow, and it needs to be the same number of sprites or frames as your animation. And then for each part, this is also, again, where it can get tedious, but you go to edit sprite and then you create it from your strip. You pull in the strip, and I mean it can be tedious, but it's actually not. It's easy to do. So you just it doesn't take a lot of steps. This will stay the same. It's 6 frames, 6 images per row. Whatever your image width and height is, and whatever your offset is vertically, like for each layer, it's going to be this, your height times whatever. So to get the feet, we don't have to offset anything. It's just the first layer. So just pull that in and then set your origin. And then, so, you know, we can pull the legs in. Excuse me. We'll just set this vertical pixel offset to 90 because that's the first one down. And so we would just do that for, you know, for all your body parts and your head pieces. And that's how you get your sprites in. And then you're going to want to pull in, make a background that you're going to use as a texture for your color lookup table. And so I named it background color lookup table. It has to be a power of 2 and used for 3D. Check that. So just load this PNG file in that you saved from Aseprite, or paste it in or whatever. So get that in there. Then I just have my background for my room. Then we make a room, just a simple room. I put 2 objects in it. I have a global variable object and a character object, and so we'll check those out. I like to make a persistent invisible global variable object just so I can store all my globals in one place and use them later. So this is just a debug flag that I have. If you want to draw the box, you can, but with this one, we'll just turn it off. And then I use a couple of enumerated types because I like to use these to keep track of where I am in an array. So instead of having to be like 0 is hair and 1 is eyes, I just use this, and just makes it simpler for me. And then I do the same thing for the body parts. But so for the sets, these are our color sets. We've got our primary colors, our secondary colors, our pants, our skin colors, our eye colors, and our hair colors. And then we've got another enumerated type here for the body parts. This is also going to be the draw order, so that's also kind of handy. So we've got feet, legs, torso, and then the pieces of the head, the base, the eyes, the face. That's what I call like the shading for the hair, and if you want to put a mouth on it or something. And then the hair itself and the hair clip. And then I got the rifle, the arm and hand, and the left hand that goes over the front. And then this just last one I called total, just so if it's an easy way to get the number of parts. And so that's all I have for globals. And then I have another object called character. That's this green box. You set the sprite to that hitbox. We're not actually going to draw the box, but it's just kind of there to act as the hitbox for the other sprites. So in this init function, this should look kind of familiar from the last video. We set the interpolation to 0 so that there's no fuzziness or shading, or not shading but blurring, sorry. And then we get a handle to the column offset in our shader, and we could take a look at the shader too. And because we got another handle here to a sampler in the shader, the color lookup table, and then we need to get a background index. So let's take a look at the shader. It's got 2 parts. Just leave the vertex shader. This is just as it is, and then you'll have this fragment shader. These 2 parts just come from the vertex shader, and then this is what we add. We add a uniform sampler called the color lookup table. This will let us use our palette as a texture to kind of get a coordinate to pull off of, and then our normalized V offset or V coordinate or row that we're going to grab from this color lookup table I call VO. And then we have to have a main function. And so in the main function, this GM base texture, that's just the sprite as it is, like unmodified piece of sprite, one of her pieces. It's like the torso or whatever. And then this texture coordinate is the current pixel we're working on in terms of that U and V normalized UV coordinate. And so it gets you an index. And so again, we need to grab the R value. The index comes in the form of a 4-component vector, which will give you the RGB and alpha component. And so we just need the R component, which corresponds to that R value from the color. That's what I was saying when I told you the sprite and the shader is going to get the column or X or U value from the sprite itself from these numbers, and that's where that happens here. And then this V offset is what we're going to set through these uniforms. These uniforms are ones that you can set externally from your code or from your other code, and that's what we're going to do. And then so when we get these set, the color lookup table is this background. We're going to set this background to this sampler so that we can pull pixels from it. And that's what this texture 2D is here it's grabbing the sprite as it is and grabbing the current coordinate of whatever pixel we're at, or the pixel at whatever coordinate we're at, sorry. And so this is just getting you the current pixel. And this texture 2D is grabbing, using the color lookup table, which is this background, and grabbing that UV coordinate that we created here, which is the R value and the offset that we're going to put in. And then again, it gets another 4 component vector, which it passes to the GL frag color, which is just the color of the current pixel. And so we're going to set it to that, and that's it. So, excuse me. So we're going to grab, using the texture coordinate, we're going to grab a pixel color from the current sprite. We're going to grab its red component. We're going to give it some V offset that we're going to set, which at the moment is 0. They're all just zeroed out, which corresponds to this first column, which explains why they're all red when they're zeroed, or this first row, all the columns for the most part are red. And then we're going to grab another, we're going to use that vector, that UV coordinate, on our color lookup table to get another color, some color off of here. And that's what we're going to make the pixel color into. And you can blend them and do all kinds of stuff with them in this, but it's just a simple swap out and using arrays, so you don't have to use any if conditionals or anything like that. So we'll keep this over here. So this is a handle. So if we want to modify this float, we grab the handle here. We have a handle. This is get uniform. We'll get this uniform from our palette swapper, the VO value. So it passes like a pointer or a handle, they call it, I guess. I don't know if they're the same or not. But they call it handle, so that's what we call it. So it gives you a handle to the offset in the shader. And then this handle points to the sampler, our color lookup table texture value or sampler. So then we need to know which texture to actually sample from. So that's where this one comes in. This background get texture, it will get everything, every sprite, background, everything is stored as a texture. And so it will pass you the ID or return the ID of our background that we're using for our lookup table. So we'll use that. We'll use these in the draw event. So for now, they're just going to sit there. So then we have a couple arrays. We have color sets. This is the number of colors in each set. So there's 32 hair colors, 16 primary and secondary color combos, 18 pants colors, 20 skin colors, and 18 eye colors. We have another array. This is the color lookup table row indices for each of the parts that correspond to, you know, the little blocks of columns we have here. So I gotta keep clicking on that instead of that. Okay, so right now they're all just set to 0, but you can see we've got the eyes, the skin, the pants, the primary and secondary color combos, and the hair. So this is how we're going to keep track of which bit, you know, which bit of the column group we're going to pull from. Oop. So then we'll make an array of sprites that we'll actually draw. And again, based on the enumerated parts, it'll also be determine the draw order. And so for the part feet, you know, we'll just give it the feet sprite. For the legs, we'll give it the leg sprite. For the torso, you know, torso sprite. And for the head pieces and the rest of the pieces, they all get their you know, you assign the sprites to the body parts. And then I make an array of what I call part color normals. These will just be the normalized row or V values, the V offsets that we're going to be passing into the shader. So that's what gets stored in these. And so we do that for the total number of parts in this enumerated type. And then we set the image speed a little lower so she's not spazzing out. So that's the create. So now we'll go to step. Well, actually, we should probably do the draw function first. That'll probably be a little easier. And then we'll work the step about how to modify the stuff in the draw. So if the debug's on, we'll just draw the box, but I turned it off. So, and then we set the shader to the palette swapping shader. And then we use this texture set stage to tell it, you know, which background to pull from. So this is the sampler handle that we have in the create code that points to the 2D sampler in our color lookup table, called color lookup table in our palette swapping shader. And then this background index is just the background index for the background texture for the actual, you know, image. So we tell it, you know, here's a sampler and here's a background texture to pull from. So that sets the stage. And then for all the parts again, for each part, we will set the, we'll use that pointer to that vertical offset, the handle column offset pointer, and we'll give it, that's what this set uniform F, shader set uniform, it lets you change the float values in your shader. So you want to change the, whatever this is pointing to, which is our vertical offset, to this normal value that we've started off with 0. That's why they all start at red. So it's just going to draw, you know, the first row for every part initially. So that's what's happening. That's how you set that. And then you just draw the sprite and it'll do the shader bits. And then when you're done, you reset the shader. So that's that. And now we'll take a look at the step function and the character. We have a step event, and that's this last one here. And so I just set some keyboard presses. So when you press I, it'll activate the skin incrementer or decrementer. So if you're holding shift, it'll decrement it. If it's below 0, it'll loop it around. If it gets above the number of sets, it'll set it back to 0. Then whatever that value is, the new row indice for that set, in this case it's skin, you'll divide it by 256, which is the size of the color lookup table, to get the normalized value. And then all the parts that use that bit of the color lookup table, you'll have to set that to that normal so that they get the right bit to pull from, so that they're all pulling from this one section or whatever of skin in this case. So that would be the base of the head, the face, the right and left hand. So when you look at the sprite, we'll load up the main palette again. So you can see the face, the blank head, left and right hand. They only use a skin tone, so they get those changed. Eyes, same thing. I mean, you could probably write, I just kind of cut and pasted this together real quick, but you could probably write scripts and do loops to get rid of a lot of this redundancy. But again, you just do it for the eye set. Same thing. And again, only the eyes use that normal, so only that one normal part would get changed. Do it again for the hair and the pants. When you get to the main and secondary, that's where it becomes a little more interesting, because you've got 2 colors on these sprites. It includes the torso, the hair clip, and the right arm. And so you can see how they've got the purple and the green. So it's a little more complicated. So the way it works is, we'll start with the primary actually. It does the same increment decrement, but then what you need to do is get a row that takes both of those into account. So you take this row indice of the primary, and this is the same value as the color sets. I should probably just have changed that, but whatever. So there's 16 colors in the primary and secondary set. So you need to take the row indices, the row indice, and multiply it by 16. And that will get you to the appropriate block of these big colors. So if it's 0, then that's why it's red, right? If it's 1, it'll take you to the bottom, to the start of these 3 brown columns. And then from the secondary color, that's when it'll start incrementing from here. So say the secondary color is blue and the first one's brown, or primary color is brown, then this is the actual row that you would get returned by multiplying the primary by 16 and then adding the secondary to it. And that's how you'll get some number between 0 and 255. So that's kind of how, and then so again, the torso, the right arm, and the head clip, you'll set those values to that normal value you just computed. And if I have the K and the L for secondary and primary. I've got different keys for each one, obviously. And then I just got a couple little things set up, like if you hit V, it'll make a Vivian, and I know what rows I want to use for her. So I just set those indices, and then I divide each one by 256 and set the appropriate parts. You know, like the legs get the pants, the head and the right and left hands get the skin, hair gets hair, eyes get eyes, torso, right arm, and head clip get the combo. And then I did another one where you hit Z, it'll just zero everything out, and that, you know, brings it all back to the reds. And so there's Z and there's V, and there's changing hair. And so, yeah, so that's how everything works. And I hope it's a little clearer now on how I did everything and how everything gets controlled. So this is the actual script that controls which row you're using. And again, the columns are determined by the R values in these palettes. You're going to have to make this palette, but that's pretty simple. You just, you know, make an R value in each one. And then it'll, like I said, it corresponds to this palette, and they are connected. The index palette connects the main palette to this color lookup table. So that's pretty much everything. And if you have any questions, just let me know. But like I said, I hope everything's clear this time, and this example is a little more useful to you. So thanks for watching.